formally welcome you to today's session. Again, it's titled Post-COVID Safety Measures for Employees. And let's get into introductions. I'm your host, Tom Goldsby. I'm a professor of supply chain management and the Haslam Chair of Logistics at the Haslam College of Business at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Tennessee. I also serve as the co-editor-in-chief of the Journal of Business Logistics. Our main speaker today is Michel Perez-Guzman, who is Director of Professional Services at Kerber Supply Chain. Michel brings strong consulting experience with him, with a demonstrated history of working in the computer software industry and extensive experience in supply chain solution applications, including WMS and voice solutions, and managing small to large complex projects for clients near and far. Welcome, Michel. It's great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Tom. Happy to be here.
So I'm going to turn things over to you in just a few minutes, but please allow me to cover a few items with our guest. First of all, why are we here? This might be particularly germane to those of you that are joining us for the first time. The purpose of this masterclass series is to tackle the challenges of today's increasingly complex supply chain, bringing you best practices and innovative thinking from academics like myself, as well as industry insiders and senior leaders like Michel. What are we trying to accomplish with the masterclass series? To provide guidance and insights in managing your supply chain as a competitive advantage. This masterclass is dedicated to disruption mitigation, and no doubt today's supply chains are laden with complexity, uncertainty, and prone to disruptions of all kinds, big and small. Note that this is the fourth and final session in this four-session masterclass. However, do not fret if you've missed any of our previous sessions. They are all available to you on demand, including today's session will be available within 48 hours of its completion. Also note that we have a catalog of completed master classes available to you on a wide variety of topics, each one consisting of 5 30-minute action-packed sessions dedicated to contemporary topics in supply chain management and advanced technologies. So with that understanding, let's go over some housekeeping items quickly. All of your phone lines are muted out there, so we're not concerned with hearing any background noise. However, we would like to hear from you in the form of questions. If you have any questions at any time during today's presentation, do not hesitate to drop us a question in the GoToWebinar menu. You'll find a little tab there. Just please click on that, and I will be monitoring the questions board and be sure to direct questions to Michel toward the end of his remarks. Also, while you're in the GoToWebinar menu, check out the industry report that complements today's session. Today's white paper is titled 15 Ways to Improve Warehouse Safety. Again, you'll find that in the handout tab of the GoToWebinar menu. So let's take a look at today's poll question and share with everyone the results of the survey. That it read, what types of productivity and safety projects are you prioritizing since COVID? And this survey showed that 75% of you are pursuing sanitation improvements, and then 25% were prioritizing process improvements. So some interesting results there, and perhaps, Michel, I can bring you into the conversation as to whether or not you see anything that confirms or maybe disconfirms your expectations.
Yeah, no, I think this pretty much is in line with what I've been seeing out, visiting other customers and talking with everybody. Right now, sanitization, disinfecting is definitely at the forefront of everybody's minds. So definitely in line with what I've been hearing out there.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks to everyone who completed the poll. And again, this is right in the crosshairs of the topic we're going to be addressing today with warehouse safety. So if we can go on to the first slide of the presentation deck, I'd just like to level set a little bit here for just a couple of minutes before I turn things over to Michel. And I'm starting off with some data, statistics that you can read through. I'll just iterate these quickly. That the transportation and warehousing sector trails only first responders like firefighters and police in terms of occupational workplace injuries. And unfortunately, the fatal injury rate for warehouse working is higher than the national average for all industries. Maybe no surprise there, given the number of moving parts that we have in today's high-paced warehouse environments. And the rate of injuries was determined by OSHA in the United States as approximately 5 injuries per 100 workers per year, which is quite high. The next point speaks to a common source of injuries, the forklift operations that are most commonly cited by OSHA as a violation. And meanwhile, the number of people entering warehouse labor force continues to rise, and average experience is on the decline. And that graph that you see at the bottom of the table, I think is incredible in that it notes that we have doubled the number of workers in warehouses. This data point is specific to the United States, but I think that the observation is probably a worldwide one. And it's almost exactly double the number of people that we see in today's warehouses compared to a decade ago. And frankly, we do have a pretty high turnover rate in warehouse work. And what that means is that the average experience level in our warehouses is quite low, which might help to contribute to some of the statistics we see here. If we can go on to the next slide, you'll see a breakdown of the most common sources of warehouse injuries. And maybe those of you watching are not surprised to see that overexertion and bodily reaction to the heavy lifting done in warehouses is the most common source of injury, followed closely by falls, slips, and trips, and contact with objects and equipment. And of course, the objects we're talking about, whether it's the palletized product, cases, cartons, or as well as the materials handling equipment, conveyance equipment, we're talking about big, heavy objects and hazards. You see there are other sources of injury that trail dramatically, but those top 3 account for the vast majority of accidents. And then if you were to hang dollars and cents on worker compensation, it's an eye-popping figure that you see in the lower right, approximately $62 billion spent by American companies per year on worker compensation. Now, these data points speak of the hazards that we see and perhaps the financial circumstances associated with it, but the fact of the matter is we need a lot of work to be done effectively and safely in the warehouse. We're introducing a lot of new workers into the environment, and what you see here speak of injuries. And Michel's going to speak of hazards that go beyond big, heavy objects. In fact, perhaps an invisible object, if you will, in the form of the coronavirus and the pandemic that we've witnessed of late. So, Michel, can you bring us up to the present with the current crisis and what it means for warehouse safety? How are companies managing safety today, and what can we expect on the far side of this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I know workplace safety has always been critical, and the way we think about it has really changed over the last few months. Not only has the current COVID pandemic really brought it into the spotlight for everybody, I think it's a stark reminder that workplace safety is not just about physical injuries and, interacting with equipment, but it's also, like you mentioned, these invisible viruses that can wreak havoc in the workplace without being seen. So if you want to go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit more about, some of the current challenges we're seeing. So as Tom noted, the supply chain industry is already under several challenges, such as increased workforce demand. The doubling of demand for workers is crazy. And then record low unemployment rates. Working with customers for the last several years, there's always been this underlying theme of not being able to find, experienced workers, the right workers, and of course the constant competition from the online giants like Amazon. It's really forcing retailers to find ways to try to just catch up and try to compete in this new world of e-commerce. And so this has really started to put a strain on already existing workplace safety measures just due to the constant turnover and really forcing management to start spending more time in the business, on tasks such as hiring, training, instead of on the business, just reviewing and improving safety measures. And so, of course, you add in a pandemic, and now businesses are scrambling to deal with a further reduced headcount. You know, folks are falling ill or staying home to take care of family. And then, you know, you got to deal with the government mandates that are constantly evolving just because this is so new to everybody. You know, it's almost hit or miss, you know, what's going to work, what's not going to work. And so oftentimes it's very clear, you know, or very unclear with the many phases that are going on, you know, these gray areas that aren't well defined. It's definitely not easy time for anybody right now. And then the disease itself, you know, the worst part is not everybody shows symptoms when they're infected, and some people are fine, others are hospitalized. So this just further leads to a lot of uncertainty and the importance of being able to quickly implement proper safety measures to help prevent the spread, and all while striving to maintain or improve existing safety standards within the supply chain. And so, you know, I mean, this is everything from, you know, implementing temperature checks, masks and other PPE, to social distancing, which is kind of hard to believe, you know, has become a household term, but, you know, that's just the world we live in today. And so, you know, wrapping all that and including, you know, proper sanitizing techniques, everybody's actually reading the label on the back of your Lysol, you know, spray to make sure that you're using it right, to make sure you're actually, you know, effectively killing this bacteria, these viruses. And so all of this is in the hope to prevent an outbreak in the workplace, which could become very costly very quickly, you know, if it leads to shutdowns, you know, even if you have to shut down an entire shift just for, you know, sanitizing, it could, you know, add up very quickly. And so when we're speaking of outbreaks, you know, there's also how do you handle them? What happens when the unthinkable happens? So a little later on, I'll be talking about some of the tools such as contact tracers that, you know, are out there now that could help when, you know, an outbreak does occur in your workplace. But first, I want to take a look at how a couple of new and existing technologies can start helping improve workplace safety both during this COVID pandemic and, you know, have lasting effects long after. Next slide, please. So first up is autonomous mobile robots, or AMRs. A lot of people have heard the term. Some people are still pretty new to the concept. It's actually a fairly new technology that has quickly started to gain recognition around the warehousing and distribution world. Now, we're not quite to the point where human-like robots are roaming the aisles by themselves. But today, you know, the technology is there and it's built more to work side by side with us to, you know, help reduce the repetitive, unproductive tasks, which can be a common point of workplace injuries, and instead just kind of work to assist everybody that's out on the floor today. And so, you know, thinking about the COVID world that we live in today, this has already been showing some really great benefits. I actually just finished an implementation where a customer was actually driven by the COVID pandemic to start looking at solutions that could help minimize, you know, their employee interactions with one another. You know, thinking of that social distancing, you know, how do I keep workers safe? So this company is an online retailer of sporting goods and apparel, and they do a lot of you know, e-com pick, a lot of small picks, and so their employees are just constantly traveling up and down aisles, brushing up against one another, touching all the bins, all of the products. I mean, in this day and age, you know, that's just an outbreak waiting to happen. And so the solution we put in place actually allowed us to assign users to a given zone. So maybe you know, 2 to 3 aisles, and the bots would be directed to go from pick bin to pick bin and carry the totes for the users for the given orders. So some of you may recognize this as a pick and pack process or pick and pass process, but without the actual manual passing of the carts. These bots, similar to you see in the middle picture there, they carry that for you. So you're not worried about, you know, passing a cart from one person to another person or dropping it off at crowded packing stations. This means employees are just not going to be in close proximity to each other throughout the majority of their shift, which is exactly what this company was looking to achieve. And there's also the added benefit that the only shared surface, between employees is a touchscreen of the bot. And I think we can all agree that it is much, much easier to disinfect the small touchscreen as opposed to the thousands of bins and items out on the floor. This also provided a little bit of a benefit from a staffing perspective. AMRs have traditionally, originally started to help improve productivity. And so, you start seeing that by eliminating the travel time that you spent, pushing carts from the point of induction, throughout your entire picking process, walking all the way to packing and repeating that over and over again. They're able to finish up faster, so their shifts are shorter, and it's looking like they probably won't need to hire as many temporary workers for their peak season coming up. So both of these actions just further help prevent the possible spread of COVID throughout their facility, which is exactly what they were aiming for. And so while that's one specific example that we saw with AMRs being incorporated into existing workflows, we've also seen an emergence of automated disinfecting bots that help ensure a safe workplace free of germs. There's already several companies out there with different solutions allowing you to choose what's right for your workplace. One common method is, having a bot that actually just works its way through high traffic areas, and it sprays a mist of disinfectant on all surfaces nearby, which is great for large open areas such as warehouses and even airports, since that mist can reach surfaces across longer distances. The other common technique that is used is bots that use ultraviolet light, and this, in a similar fashion, walks around these areas and it destroys viruses just using light alone. And so the downside to that is they usually have a shorter effective distance, and so it's better suited for smaller areas such as office buildings, but they do offer the added benefit of not needing to refill the disinfectant solution all the time, and there's actually no waiting period where you have to let the mist settle. Unlike the misting bots, you usually have to wait 20-30 minutes before folks can go back in. So on that note, it's definitely worth mentioning that, the use of AMRs started well before this COVID pandemic. So, looking after, we know that there is definitely benefits on many levels with their investment. Like I mentioned, there is an expected increase in productivity, which is always welcome and can provide a pretty decent return on investment in a short period of time. And there's also the added benefit of simply making employees' lives easier. This can help greatly reduce workplace accidents by not having, users crossing paths with forklifts as often, or having to maneuver heavy carts throughout tight spaces. And unlike us, AMRs can carry around these totes and bins and boxes all day and all night without skipping a beat. They do have a myriad of onboard sensors, LiDAR, radar, cameras, and all these algorithms. So they're not about to start causing accidents, just due to worker fatigue anytime soon, which is one of the leading causes of workplace accidents today. If we go on to the next slide, we can talk about another technology that has actually been around for a while. It's voice recognition technology. This was first introduced in the late 80s as a way to provide hands-free and eyes-free workflows in different areas of the supply chain. Common voice implementation best practices have already been helping users minimize product handling. For example, instead of picking up a case from a pick bin, having to rotate it and find the UPC barcode to scan as validation, voice employs the use of what we call check digits at each location that can be spoken into the headset, and then the voice system will let you know if you're at the correct location or not. And if I happen to be in front of the wrong location, all I have to do is shift my gaze, look again, and read off the next set of check digits for the right location. I can do all this without the need to handle any product until I'm actually, ready to pick the product. And so as far as good hygiene practices, long before COVID, voice vendors have already had this in mind. You can replace the windscreen on microphone end caps, the ear pad on the speaker can also be replaced, and some vendors have actually gone as far as making the expensive electronics module, the microphone and the earpiece, totally separate from the headband that it actually touches your head. that allows users to keep their individual headband, which is typically just plastic and padding, so not very expensive. And then you're only sharing the electronics module, which doesn't touch your head. And so, it also got me thinking about the topic of social distancing. And then I actually remembered one other common side effect of voice implementations that I've heard a lot over the years, but isn't really advertised as a selling point. When doing follow-up visits with previous customers, I am often told how users with voice are actually having less side conversations with their peers. After putting some thought into it, we've come to realize that this is attributed to a couple of things. One, the users themselves are more focused on listening to the instructions coming out of the headset and making sure that they're speaking the right commands. And then on the other side, all of the non-voice users have started to kind of leave all those folks with the headset alone. It's something about seeing someone else wearing headphones or a headset that, makes us not want to strike up a conversation. I think this is the primary reason why if you're on a plane or on the subway, you put on your headphone when you don't want to be left alone. So, all of that is great right now in an era of social distancing. You don't want folks interacting and having these side conversations. So, voice users have already been seeing that for decades. And so all of this increased focus has other benefits too, right? So you're not constantly having to juggle a scanner and cases of product and putting scanners in bins and all that, or even worse, constantly glancing down at a screen for your next instruction with forklifts flying by. You're greatly reducing your chances with voice of reducing those workplace accidents and injuries just due to distractions. This has always been a selling point and continues to be so. And of course, the primary reason voice technology has been so successful in the supply chain world is the increased productivity it brings. So just like AMRs, voice implementations can help reduce shift lengths or the need for temporary workers, which is great, not only during these times, but long after. And so, going on to the next slide, I've been talking a lot about how technology can help improve workplace safety during a pandemic, but, what happens when you do have an outbreak? Do you shut down your entire operation? Do you try to go with your best guess on, who could have been exposed? Well, that's kind of where contact tracing comes in. And it doesn't necessarily have to be some top of the line app that needs to be installed on users' phones or equipment to track their every move. You can actually get creative with some basic reporting that can help management trace potential spread. Many warehouse management systems, they actually provide some kind of transaction logging, whether it be by employee or by equipment, that helps track who did what and where, anywhere from receiving to picking to loading a truck. You can actually gather all the information needed and then start making the connections to see, what areas a given person was in throughout the day and where to focus any contact tracing efforts. Contact tracing actually has a lot in common with basic labor tracking that you can find in a WMS or an ERP. Metrics such as the amount of travel done by employee, locations frequently visited, high velocity items that are commonly handled. Having that visibility to this data not only helps with identifying, possible outbreaks, but thinking long term can also improve processes in the warehouse, leading to a safer work environment. And supervisors are always looking for reporting, for additional labor metrics. So this might be the kickstart that you need to start thinking about how reporting can help today, but how it can also help in the future. So moving on to the next slide, I think throughout all of this, I think the most important thing to remember is the people. So we want to improve workplace safety measures to help our employees and our coworkers, who in turn help keep the supply chain running. And these are definitely challenging times for everybody, from the C-level execs trying to keep up with new rules and regulations, supervisors dealing with employees calling out sick and having to rearrange schedules, and not to mention the janitorial staff suddenly faced with 10 times the workload, trying to keep common areas clean. It's very critical that we all remember to just work together and as a team and try to get through these tough times. And I really think that starts by promoting a culture of good safety practices and cleanliness that helps set that foundation to hopefully prevent workplace accidents and reduce the chance of future outbreaks. I think it's great that everybody's now getting in the habit of washing their hands more frequently, looking for hand sanitizer in public spaces, and in general, just being more cognizant of the potential to spread this virus, even if, you don't feel very sick. I think everybody has previously grown accustomed to just expecting the flu season or the common cold is going to, take over our workplaces during these colder months. But, while this may be a minor inconvenience for most, I think it's something we should all strive to prevent the spread of and encourage everybody to maintain good habits, regarding workplace safety. And so, to close things up, I think one way to kickstart that culture is to take time to review, sick time policies with HR. Make sure everybody's comfortable taking sick time when they need it, because as we've seen countless times on the news, all it takes is one person coming in sick for a day to shut down an entire facility. So with that, Tom, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Michel. Excellent.